everyone. Welcome to the Women in Design Fest 2022. I'm Bhuvana, your host this weekend, and I'm so excited that so many of you will be joining us virtually to listen to our incredible speakers over the next 7 weekends. The Women in Design Fest is presented to you by the UMO Design Foundation, a nonprofit that has been creating design awareness for over a decade through events, conferences, and design education. UMO is the force behind initiatives like the UX India Conference, the Women in Design Fest, the UMO Design School, UX in Collaborative, and the Design Social. At UMO, our mission is to inspire and educate 1 million women to become designers by the year 2030. To take this forward, we aim to provide scholarships worth 150,000 US dollars to educate 100 women aspirants via our UMO Design School and make them employable in the year 2022. We welcome you to be a part of the UMO Design family by joining us as a partner, a mentor, or a volunteer. The Women in Design Fest is happening over the next 7 weekends. Today, we have an amazing set of women speakers, Michelle, Apurva, Lakshya, and Dhruti, addressing us today. So let's welcome our first speaker for the day. Joining us from Mumbai is Michelle Parayil, a conversation design manager with GeoHaptic India. So please join me in welcoming Michelle. I'd like to add a note for the audience. Please drop your questions for Michelle in the comments section. We can get to them at the end of her talk. Over to you, Michelle.
Thank you, Bhuna. I hope I'm audible and that everything is visible. We'll start off with a very quick introduction to conversation design and CUX. And I'll also be talking about very quickly why you should even care about these. I know that a lot of designers are watching this today, and I'd like to briefly explain why you should even care about this field of conversational artificial intelligence if you haven't heard about it already. I'll then be diving into the 7 practices of CUX that every designer should know about, and then I'd like to end with a bit of a Q&A. Now, very quickly, what is conversation design and CUX if you haven't heard of it already? It is the art and science of crafting the experience between a virtual assistant and the end user. This definition might seem a bit trite, but what I mean to say is that behind a virtual assistant, it's not just technology that drives the intelligence of the assistant. It's also the personality, how the bot comes across, what the bot can do, that leads to it having an impactful outcome for the people using it. There are lots of facets to conversation design. It's not just writing, it's also having a strong background in user experience design, understanding how product design works, especially because conversations are designed per assistant. So that means you need to craft a conversation and an experience for the brand that you're creating the assistant for, or for maybe any mission-driven initiative that the virtual assistant is there to serve. And lastly, very, very obviously, you need to understand how artificial intelligence training and linguistics works, because there is a very strong element of that when you are designing the conversations, when you're training the bot on what to respond to. So that's conversation design, very briefly. Now, why should you care about this field? In fact, when I started and became a conversation designer in 2017, there were not really any jobs in the market for conversation design. And if you searched for it, you would find these niche articles, and companies like Google did invest heavily in conversation design then. But today, this market has blown up massively. You find around 60 to 70 to 80 jobs on job boards if you search for this term. Also, conversational artificial intelligence as a domain and an industry has grown quite a lot. It has, as per these statistics that you can see on screen, it's many $1 billion, and it's valued very highly because of the impact that it has had, especially during the pandemic. An example that I can give is that of my company, the company I work with currently, Haptic. We have created the COVID WhatsApp virtual assistant that helps millions of users get access to their COVID vaccination certificates. And it's an automated personal assistant. So you can see that the impact of this is not just for enterprises, it's not just for individual people or technologists who care about artificial intelligence as a niche field. It is for anybody, any company, any brand, any person interested in this field to make use of this. And you must have seen this because most UX designers are the first people who are approached whenever any brand decides to take a step forward in the conversational artificial intelligence domain. Um, be it a quick chatbot for their Facebook account or a massive overhaul of their customer support system where the company decides that they want to start automating things. There is quite an investment in this field, and UX designers would normally be the first people approached to solve this problem. So, in the next few slides, I'm hoping to lay down 7 practices that you can use when you may be asked to solve this problem of using conversational AI to solve any sort of automation problem at your company. I will be going over what are the best ways that you can use uh, these principles of CUX to solve a problem, and what are the things that we do as conversation designers. And I'll be sharing some insider tips and tricks to ensure that any assistant you design, any conversation that you create is a comprehensive, holistic experience. So let's begin. So the first practice, whenever you have to design a conversational assistant, is to pick the right problem and the right platform. Very often, people assume that AI can solve everything, but that's really a very big motto to go along with in the first go. You first need to pick the right problem that you're solving. So, say your company is not really able to handle the massive overload of customers calling in requesting to learn about your product. In that case, the problem that you'd be solving is how to acquire customers and how to ensure that they're correctly driven to the right product within your company. If your problem is a little bit more downstream, where you already have existing customers but you're not really able to service them, you're not able to give them the right product updates, you're not able to say give them tracking information, which is such a practical small thing, and a lot of customers are calling in and requesting to learn about, hey, where is my product, why has it not reached me. That would fall in bucket number 2, which is servicing customers. So any problem that would fall under customer support would fall under this bucket. And lastly, you have the problem of not being able to engage with customers and grow your audience. One way to think about it would be, think about the millions of customers who are searching about your brand online, and they want to let's say ask some basic questions and just see if where the nearest store is, or they just want to interact with your brand to just learn about the product, and they're not necessarily customers who are already there with you. In that case, why not have a bot built for them on Google search? And that might seem incredible to you, but yes, Google does allow this. Google has a feature called Google Business Messages, which you can embed right within the search window of your business, and where you can chat and answer these basic questions. So as you can see, it's important to first define which bucket you're picking and what is the right platform to choose. As you must have noticed, I just mentioned Google Business Messages as a platform. But if you're trying to solve support queries, Google Business Messages may not be the right platform, because most of those kinds of queries either come through a call center or through a WhatsApp or through email. So it's important to first pick the right problem and platform and not fall prey to the mistake of just trying to do everything at once. Moving on, practice number 2 is to design a personality. Most people know this about conversation design already, that it's giving a personality to your virtual assistant. It's giving a voice to your assistant. And this is so critical to define, to create a bot persona that is consistent with your brand voice. And it's important to ensure that it's consistent everywhere. Your customer support answers should not sound like they come from a cold manual. It should still sound like it comes from a caring, engaging virtual assistant. And that is obviously one of the bigger things that you have a conversation designer or a copywriter there to do. You have to maintain a voice throughout if you want to ensure that your brand comes across like it is consistent even in your virtual assistant, because it's an employee of the company in a way. Practice number 3 um, is communicating effectively. If you see these points on screen, you would have noticed that I have actually borrowed these from the 7 C's of effective communication, and I'll go over these very quickly. So, practice number 1 here is completeness. It's important to plan for all types of users. Users are not just going to come in from one source, they're not just going to call in, they'd probably also chat in, they'd probably also um, you'd have customers who are angry, you would have customers who are willing to listen to your assistant first and then state their query. So it's important to think of all of these facets. It's also important to set expectations about the next steps when you start a conversation. It's not just enough to answer a question one off. So if I ask a virtual assistant, hey, can you tell me the show timings, maybe give them the show timings, but also tell them, um, the show timings are this, would you also like to download an event calendar? Anything that helps complete the cycle of a journey is important in this point. The next would be concreteness. With a virtual assistant, with any on any platform, you have different features that can help you, like elements, UI elements, buttons, smart actions, forms. Yes, even within chatbots, you can use forms. You have images. All of these can be used to have a more holistic experience. It's not always text back and forth. Sometimes questions are answered better through an image. The next would be courtesy and consideration, right? Your interface should provide suggestions to lost users. Very often, if you have used a bot of your own, you must have noticed that you tend to log on, but then you have no idea what question the bot can answer. And very often you answer a question, but then the bot breaks or it gives you a reply like, I'm sorry, I can't answer the question. So it's important to give suggestions. Next one would be correctness. Make sure that your language is obviously correct. It's such a basic point. Grammar check, proofread. And this is applicable across interfaces. The next point would be that your steps have to be clear, crisp, and short. One of the biggest mistakes that any conversation designer, virtual assistant designer falls prey to, where we just copy paste FAQs and answers from the website as is without realizing that chat is is a small interface. It's important to cut answers down to 300 characters or less for a person to be able to read and remember it. And that actually brings me to my last point, which is that don't go over the screen. Your one answer should not take up 3 screens worth of space. Keep it very, very skimmable. Even if a person asks a question, your answer should just be able to, you should be able to read through it very quickly. All right. The next practice would be recognize and recover from errors. Your bot is going to go through phases where not phases, it would go through areas where it cannot respond to certain questions. This is perfectly fine because not bots are not created to answer every single question under the sun unless they are some form of generalized artificial intelligence, something like say a Mitsuku or a Siri who can answer questions about everything under the sun. If you are building a virtual assistant or a bot to answer a particular domain or subdomain of queries, it is only going to be able to answer queries from that domain, which is perfectly fine. But it is how you respond to anything out of scope that really makes your experience. Let me give you an example. If I have built a bot for, let's say, a company like Sleepy Cat, which provides mattresses to end users, and I have a person coming to me and typing something like, "Where can I buy balloons?" It is just purely out of the scope of the bot, which is fine. But instead of replying with a message like, "Sorry, error, system error, that does not make sense," can I respond to the user in a more humane way that, hey, that seems like something I am not able to answer at the moment, or it seems like something that's a little beyond what I am able to do, but here's what I can do for you, and provide suggestions. So, providing suggestions, providing next steps is so critical. I want to talk about my last point here a little bit, which is think about edge cases for APIs. APIs are systems that let you communicate with an existing database. So, for example, let's talk about the mattress company that I spoke about. If I need to find tracking information, the bot would not magically be able to fetch this information from thin air. I would have to call an API that would then talk to an existing database and provide that information that, hey, Michelle, your tracking data, your parcel number 123 has reached, let's say, the Mumbai hub. If that's what it's supposed to tell me, there are also going to be cases where this API just does not respond because systems sometimes fail. There are technical problems. So if that's the case, then I do want to think about that as a conversation designer and ensure that there's no non-engaging, completely bland copy even in those cases, even though they might seem very remote and small. All right, moving on to practice number 5, which is that we build virtual assistants and artificial intelligence assuming that it'll do its work, assuming that it'll perform in all sorts of cases. But there are going to be cases where the bot is not going to be able to respond at all. It's probably going to go haywire when a person asks something that maybe is within scope. Maybe they send a long message explaining and detailing out why they're so frustrated about their parcel not reaching on time. If that's the case and your bot is not able to respond, it's better just not to try and avoid that scenario by saying, hey, I'm a bot, can't really answer. Provide the user with an outlet there. Let them talk to an agent, let them talk to a person. Most companies usually have a customer support team or some form of escalation mechanism, even if it is just an email address. Provide this to the end user. Let them go and talk to somebody else. Do not have the fear of them not leaving the bot window. That means setting the right expectation. That means that your end user will know that it's an automated virtual assistant. There is no fooling them. Unless your bot is able to pass the Turing test, which is very few bots, the end user most likely knows that it's a bot already. So don't force chatbot usage. Ensure that more complex queries go to agents who can be empathetic, who can give the end user the care that they require, and provide an alternate solution always. This ties back into my previous point as well, which is that you should not be leaving any user without the next step at any stage of the conversation. Let's move on to practice number 6. So now you have a conversation that can communicate effectively, solve your problem, and take care of conditions where there are errors. You should plan for adoption. This is also one of the mistakes that brands make when they don't think about how bots should be promoted or marketed. Nobody is going to automatically find out that a virtual assistant is available. In fact, most people have to strive very hard to discover that there is an automated solution that can solve their problem in a jiffy. They still hold on to phone lines, they still stay on calls. So, plan adoption. If you have an IVR, for example, where people are often coming to ask a very simple question, in the IVR journey itself, you can try and educate customers to, hey, why don't you text us on this number? And you must have seen lots of brands try and do this today. A lot of brands are trying to create awareness about their WhatsApp channels, for example, especially in India. Outside, people usually have a web bot put up on their website. So inform people that a virtual agent is available, market using existing methods. This is the primary way you'll be able to see the impact of your virtual assistant. So always plan for this, plan adoption and marketing. And lastly, I'd like to leave you with this practice. It's that virtual assistants are like children. They're not like a complicated software tool that you build once and then you wait and never evolve or keep improving it. Virtual assistants are like onboarding a new employee into the company. So keep training them, keep analyzing conversations. It's not just about what to add newly to the bot, it's also about seeing whether your current journeys, say you've picked 3 or 4 use cases, are they doing well? Are people dropping off at certain points? Where are people being frustrated? What if my API is down? It's important for you to look at this information, and whatever conversational platform you're on, be it Dialogflow or any other platform you might be using, usually allows you to look at this data. So I would suggest that you keep looking at this information, try and get the best out of the data that your customers are giving you, and give your customers a great experience. Um, so that brings me to the end of my 7 practices. I know this is quite a lot of information, but um, all of these 7 practices have a very important role to play in giving you a comprehensive virtual assistant that helps you really solve problems at scale. And I hope you'll use these. And that's it. If you have any questions, do leave them in chat. I'd be more than happy to answer. Thank you.
Thank you, Michelle. That was a really insightful talk. So now we have a couple of questions from the audience. So let's get to that. So, one question is, these days, almost every website has a chat bot, whether or not it is required by the user. How can we assess the need for a chatbot in the first place?
Absolutely. And this actually ties in so well with the first point that I had. It Most of the reasons these chatbots appear without really any impact is because the brand has not gone through the effort of looking at data to see what customers need. Uh, Most brands can use a chatbot for some reason or the other. Out of those 3 points that I mentioned, it's either for getting new customers, for existing customers, or to grow their customer base. So assessing the need of it I would recommend look at existing CRM data, look at call center data, look at how people are playing around with your website, and only then decide if you really need a chatbot and what it should do and where it should really live. So I feel your pain when I hear that every website has a chatbot that usually doesn't do anything, but it's usually because correct assessment has never been
Thank you, Michelle. We have another question for you, and it says, is there any optimal limit to the number of questions before the bot hands over to the support to avoid customer annoyance?
That's actually a great question. I would suggest it depends on the severity of the condition. If the case is that a customer is truly frustrated about a very sensitive query where you know that the bot is not really going to do anything, I would suggest don't have any questions at all, hand it over directly to an agent. But if it's a condition where the bot can easily collect 1 or 2 pieces of very obvious information, say it's a tracking problem, and you know that the agent is going to have to ask basic details like the tracking ID anyway, the bot can quickly collect these details when an agent would actually take 5 to 7 minutes to come in and then ask these questions. So if a bot can help and support the agent in any way by asking 1 or 2 pieces of existing information, the bot should do that before handing it
Okay. Thank you, Michelle. That was great.
over. Thank you so much.
Our next speaker is Apurva Dabhade. Apurva, who's joining us from Pune, is a UX Research Operations Project Manager with IBM. So please join me in welcoming Apurva. And as I said earlier, feel free to drop your questions in the comments so Apurva can answer them in the end.
Thanks, Bhuvana. Are you able to see my screen? Okay. So I'm going to talk today about power of content design. I'm Apurva, and I'm a UX Research Ops Project Manager at IBM. And when I think about my career, I love learning about the impact and behavioral changes associated with words and language. And today I'm going to talk about the connection between language, that is content, and human behavior. So today we are going to rely on some research techniques to make this connection. To do that, I'll talk about what is a hindsight bias, what are weak signals, and why we overlook weak signals, and what content design has got to do with any of this. And then in the end, we will hopefully conclude that content design is a powerful discipline within UX, um, and start investing a little bit more as an industry in this field. I want to dive into this presentation with a little bit of activity. So if you all can just start imagining a little bit, close your eyes maybe, and think that you are trying to end your day, and you are it's night and you are on a bed, and you're trying to constitute your thoughts, think about what went well, what didn't go well, retrospecting a few things, and then suddenly there's a bomb that is a blast from the past, and you're trying to analyze this past situation, and you're trying to make sense of why something worked out the way it did, or it didn't work out as you would have expected. And while you're doing all of that, um, you would now, in present, you would think that, well, all of the signs for something working out or not working out were there. So why did I overlook those signs? And why does it seem so obvious now? So the reason for that is this is hindsight bias, which is very common and almost every one of us experiences it at some or the other point in life. When we analyze events in hindsight, especially the ones that led to tragedies, it is easy to see the signs that led to them. And it seemed trivial, these signs seem trivial in the past, but these are very obvious to us now. And that is why these are called weak signals. There's a variant of a Winston Churchill quote that I really like. That is, when people stumble upon the truth, they usually pick themselves up and hurry about their business. These truths are seemingly inconsequential, weak signs. They they show that they are out of control well in advance, but people choose to ignore them. So why do they get overlooked? Well, there are multiple reasons. I broadly classify them as individual biases and organizational biases. So let's try to see what these are. Individual biases such as selective perception. This is basically when you try to grasp information that fits in with the mental model that you already have. So you want to pick and choose information that fits well with you. So how can you overcome these? Challenge your fundamental assumptions and try to not overlook the ones that are unpleasant or undesirable, just because they are too discordant with your own reality. Another bias group is organizational biases. What this is biases that exist within teams, groups, or organizations, and we would expect that when you are in a group, working in a group, you would be more challenged to think about your biases, and people will challenge your thoughts, and you would, as a group, challenge the status quo. But turns out that groupthink is something that happens when all of you are trying to reach a common outcome, and you're trying to rely on each other's thoughts. And when one person tries to be a strong voice, everyone gathers around that person, and automatically the entire group starts thinking in one way, which is not desirable if you want to avoid this bias. So groups can easily become victims to narrow-minded analysis, tunnel vision, a false sense of consensus, and poor information gathering. So how can you overcome this? Well, research, debate with each other, and merge into a bigger picture. Now, while we're talking about all these biases and how can we overcome them, the question you might have is how can content design help in all of this? So let's see. The content we consume decides the importance of any problem or situation, and sort of determines the actions that we may take in that problem. So it is likely that if there's a problem and it's not supported with a strong narrative, you may just ignore the problem or um, just choose an action that fuels your own bias. But in the design world, content is often seen as a marketing tool to communicate the goodness of something and to sell something. But I'm here to tell you that your content can very well be the root cause of many problems, and it could cause systemic problems as well. So, as we try to understand how content is placed in all of this scenario, let me talk about a research technique that is causal layered analysis. This is a very famous technique that was introduced by Sohail Inayatullah, and I want to share a little bit about what this looks like. Now, imagine a problem in the shape of an iceberg. What you see about the problem is just the first layer of the problem. This layer is called problem, and it tells you what is happening, what are the visible patterns, what is changing, um, anything that is very visibly obvious. If we go deeper, we find the second layer of the iceberg, that is the causes. This layer tells us what structures influence the problem and the visible patterns and how they are related to each other. Further down is the layer of worldview. It tells us what values, beliefs, and deeper assumptions are enabling these structures in the second layer. And this shows us the triggering points or um, the origins of these triggering points of the problem. The final layer is that of the myths and metaphors. These are core metaphors and grand narratives that describe the situation and help us understand what might be the unconscious dimension of the problem. So we see that the deepest or most hidden layer has to do with the narratives we use, the words we consume, and the stories we tell. Myths and metaphors lie at the bottom of most problems. This also means that content we design and the narratives we propagate has the ability to make or break systems. Let's take an example. 40 or 50 years ago, climate change was probably not as serious as it is today, and it would also have been a weak signal. What's interesting to note is that many of us can say with a certain amount of confidence that, um, oh, this was supposed to happen, you know, what else would you expect? Humans are degrading the planet, so it was bound to happen. To make sense of weak signals like these, we need to give them enough importance. We need to do enough research to validate these signals and take time to report this research in a way that it is efficient. But I'm sure most researchers today here will agree that doing research is not enough. To make sure that the research is impactful, um, and it helps in designing better outcomes, we need to report the research using accurate and strong narratives. We need to tell stories that matter. Most narratives related to climate change are doom and gloom narratives, even today. Um, Examples are glaciers are melting, tigers are getting endangered, and so on. While all of that is still true, the story lacks any recommendations to solve the problem. So, good narratives usually have accountability, a call to action, and empathy. Now, content alone cannot solve all these systemic problems, of course. There are multiple complex factors such as policies, culture, politics as well, that we need to understand and we need to take into account. But the thing is that all of these things, all of these factors are embedded in language. This means content design can be used to influence all of these factors. The leaders who used strong narratives to define seriousness of COVID-19 and its consequences were able to better deal with the whole pandemic and the um, consequences of the pandemic as well. So strong policies are built on foundation of strong narratives, and every weak signal deserves a chance to be analyzed before we discard it altogether. So to conclude, here's your three-step quick guide. Know your biases, acknowledge them, and try to challenge them when you are trying to solve a problem. Analyze the myths and metaphors associated with the problem. This is very close to the 5 I method in design thinking, which most designers are probably aware of. And then last step is using content as a tool to design better outcomes. Um, this is something that um, I think in Michelle's talk as well, she emphasized on what content can do to provide a great user experience. So I hope this talk was helpful. And if you want to connect with me, I'm available on email and my LinkedIn. And thank you so much for listening to my talk today.
Thank you, Apurva. I'm waiting for some questions from the audience. Yes. So, Apurva, we have a question from the audience for you. What would a good practical way to design a call to action without dwelling too much on the negative impact?
Interesting question. I think for me, I think about content as a way of delivering three things: the why, the what, and the how. So when you're talking about these, when you're trying to solve these three questions, the why, what, and how, you are trying to also tell a story that talks about the concept of the problem. And then when you're talking about the how, you eventually move to a solution phase. So having these three elements in any story or in any content you design is very important, I think.
Thank you, Apurva. So we move to our next speaker. Our next speaker is Lakshya Mahal, who has over 10 years of experience in UX. Lakshya is based out of New Delhi and heads the product design team at SIFE. Lakshya has recorded her talk and sent it over to us. So let's have that over now.
Hey everyone, my name is Lakshya and I had the product design at SIFE. I'm really, really happy to be here today. And today I'm going to talk to you about how you could be a self-taught designer, or you could go for a college degree for that. But what should you do? So probably I could give you a few tips here and there. So let's just get started, right? Whether you are a success or a failure as a designer, it really depends on what kind of decisions you take, right? And what are the opportunities that come your way, and which ones do you take in your career, right? So one of those critical decisions is whether you teach yourself, right, what you need to know about design, whether it's product design, whether it's graphic design, it could be anything, right? Or you would want a college or university degree to do it for you, right? Some of you know Many thriving designers are self-taught, and I would say in a way I am too. I do have a degree in graphic design, but being a product designer, I have mostly self-taught. And some are really successful, right? Other designers, they have been successful in the field, and they have also gone via the traditional education route, right? Both types of designers, will tell you that there are pros and cons to whatever paths you choose, and probably you could consider those pros and cons, right, when you're embarking upon this journey of being a product designer. So yeah, I mean, I'm just going to talk about, probably how, the self-taught and secondary education is, and probably how you could be successful with either of the choice, right? It could be anything that you would really like. So probably I will just begin with the, pros and cons of being a self-taught designer. Let me begin with the cons first, right? So there was a time when there weren't any, cheerleaders for self education. And instead, many of us were told to complete school, of course, and come go to a good college, get a great job, probably with a reliable company, and so that we could just go on and retire. But things have changed dramatically over the years, right? People are teaching themselves design, UX, but they are also teaching themselves how to start a business. They're also teaching themselves copywriting, painting, right? Even I would say interior design, right? So many things, million other things, and these things are something you could only learn in a classroom at one point of time, right? And I mean, although internet has kind of made this self-taught much more manageable, there are still a few cons around this type of education. So let me just list two things here. So one, of course, is the factor. I would say it's a major factor. It's self motivation. So if you aren't self motivated about your studies, right, they can really just drag out, right? So if you just simply put it out there, self education requires self motivation, right? So you won't have a professor who will keep you in line with your assignments, and you probably don't even have to worry about your grades. You're also not tied to a specific schedule, and you may not even have any deadlines to keep. So if you can not motivate yourself to keep up with your studies and excel in whatever you're learning, it will be really challenging to take that self-taught route, right? The second con that I could talk to you about is if there's no schedule and no curriculum, in this to adhere to. So, um, so there's one reason that people attend a college or a university is that it's very structured, right? So your classes are scheduled and you have a curriculum to follow. You must adhere to it to complete your program, and then you earn your degree. When you're self-taught, you don't necessarily have a structured schedule and an organized list of classes, that you must take to learn all you need to graduate. And many people are not really confident in their ability to map out what they want to learn, and how are they going to learn it. So they don't even bother with the self-education. um, so I think these two kind of put together are the cons of being self-taught. Let me complete this with a few pros. So you can go at your own pace, right? So when you're teaching yourself, you can take your time and go at your own pace. There are loads of resources online. There's free courses and easily accessible literature that you could use. You can just sign up for those, and and find to make your self-taught design journey just as desirable and practical, right? The second one here is maintaining a suitable work-life balance. All right. So when you're self-taught, you can also maintain a suitable work-life balance a lot easier. So many of us have to work jobs. We maintain relationships. Some of us are new parents. Some are even seasoned parents, right? And probably we also have other creative passions that we pursue while expanding our design careers. So this makes flexibility much more critical, right? When you're self-taught, you can design a schedule and only take on a workload that allows you to maintain a healthy work-life balance. Um, and the next on my list for pros, of being a self-taught designer is you will learn things that you wouldn't in a classroom. So unfortunately, you can't learn everything there is to know about design through textbooks and modules. However, when you're self-taught designer, you can take your studies to the cracks, right? I mean, just go out there. You learn things that probably are not otherwise available to you in a formal education classroom. um, and also our design industry has, I mean, it has been changing, and it kind of changes rapidly. It's like an ongoing thing, right? So you may easily be able to come across those changes as you learn things. All right, you learn new techniques and you can apply those as well, right? So you're always on the hunt for what's new and trending when you're self-taught, right? Something probably a traditional student may not be accustomed to doing, in my opinion, right? And how could you really be successful as a self-taught designer, right? So I would say this self-taught route presents its own unique set of challenges, right? So it's possible to have tremendous success as a self-taught designer so long as you're organized, you're determined, and dedicated to making the most out of your studies, right? So how could you approach self-education to ensure that you have um, the best design career possible, right? First and foremost, right, draft an education plan, right? So how would you do that? Your education plan doesn't have to be, super formal. Instead, identify the skill that you want to grow, right, and put together a step-by-step plan and how you're going to master that skill, right? For example, if you're going to take a free course, say from a product designer, right? So while you will, can you not, like, will you first, compile a list of blog posts to read and match them with the specific practice exercises, right? So like, probably take up some exercises to do on your own, and whatever you decide to do, right, ensure you've chosen an area you're interested in, right? Identify what you want to learn, map out the steps of your desired outcome, and then take those steps. Secondly, hold yourself accountable. So, if you aren't at a place in your life where you hold yourself accountable and take ownership for everything you do or don't do, self education won't be productive. Neither would a traditional education for that matter, right? So, it would be best if you held yourself accountable, and when you get your lessons done for the day, celebrate. If you don't, just be sure that your plan for the next day is ready, right? And include what you couldn't get done today, in the next day's schedule. So do it tomorrow. If you can't do it today, just do it tomorrow. But complete things. Yeah, hold yourself accountable for that. Next is building a professional network. Right? So just because you're a self-taught designer, or does not mean you have to do it all on your own. Take time to build a professional network that could help you develop your career over time. So use social media, join design groups, engage, right, with other designers as well who are kind of in the same boat as you. You can also follow your favorite and probably successful designers out there, right, on social media, so Twitter, LinkedIn, and you can learn from the content that they put out, right? And don't forget to stay in touch with designers you know personally, right? And create an ongoing conversation with them throughout the years, right? So don't lose that. Next is, choosing your platforms, right? So choose your platforms wisely. So when you're self-taught, it can be very easy to get carried away, be overwhelmed by all the information and content that's out there about design. And the best way to minimize the chance of becoming overwhelmed is to choose suitable platforms to learn on, right? So for example, you could use YouTube to absorb tutorials, right? You could use LinkedIn for free and affordable online courses. You could also take your time to research various websites, probably blogs that are dedicated to teaching design, right? And then you can choose from those. Now, just moving on, probably let's take a look at pros and cons of getting a design degree, formal education, right? So, I mean, getting a formal education is just, probably as much of an opportunity to grow your design skill set as self education. In a formal education, it kind of allows you to the opportunity, it gives you that opportunity to choose a skill or a set of skills you want to grow, and you can find a program that mirrors those education goals, and with it comes an exact bill of what you learn, right? Whom you learn it from, how you learn it, and how long it will take. So for instance, an aspiring designer may want to get better at producing designs for digital spaces. With this in mind, they'll explore getting a degree in digital media, right? So, and a digital media degree will help them create great visual communication elements, right? That probably touches hearts and minds of people in this era, right? So yeah, I mean that's the crux of it actually. And so now let's just take a deeper look at the pros and cons. So there's a significant financial obligation, right? So it's expensive to go to any college or university, but the cost of getting a design degree could be outrageous, to be honest. And the total price, the other associated fees, will differ based on what kind of institution you go to, and what are they offering. So and certain times particular degrees also matter, right? So generally, if you just go out and check it out, so you'll see designers kind of folk up to, I would say, upwards 25 to 30,000 USD, right, to take actual education, design education, right? And then again, you must adhere to a schedule and the learning pace here. So this is kind of a con for formal education, right? So when you decide to take formal education route, you sign up for a specific class schedule, right? You also must adhere to the learning pace of the professors, right? So it's not your pace. It's more about how quick or how slow is the professor moving. And whatever the course syllabus says, you must do all those things. You must complete them at designated timelines, and I mean, ultimately you have to pass the class, so you have to do it. And if you aren't fond of schedules and timelines, much like I am, this may not be easy to get used to, right? And just to finishing, just to come to a finish, I'll just add a few pros there. So you have a pre-built network when you have a formal education. So I guess this is one of the best things about formal education, is the network that's available to you. All college campuses, universities have their own network that you could leverage, right, to keep your skill set growing and your education focused. You could build relationships with fellow students, the faculty, and that open up work opportunities for you, and it'll help you navigate the challenges of college life as well. And you also have professors to guide you through the entire program, which is a massive, massive plus for so many people, right? The next one is learning the basics, history of design, right? So many self-taught graphic or any product designers, they skip the basics, right, and history of design in the studies. And many professional recruiters and expert designers in companies, they can tell. So you want to know your way around typical design softwares, various tools at your disposal. But knowing the basics and the history are, I would say, incredibly important to your success. So therefore, when you get a formal education in any kind of design, right, you will be required to learn the history of graphic design anyway. And you have to master the basic skills also of graphic design and concepts. And of course, you can take advantage of campus resources. So campus resources can be fantastic for your career if you use them right. But unfortunately, so many students really don't tap into the power of the resources on campus, and they end up taking a longer route to success, than necessary. And many campuses offer career resources like resume building, cover letter, etc. Even job search guidance. And there are plenty of groups on campuses, catering to different interests, where you can meet new people and network. And in addition to this, you can take advantage of the career driven events that many universities and colleges have. There are get-togethers on campus that can really introduce you to suitable companies to work for after graduating, or even probably potential freelance clients. Also, once you graduate, you are part of the school's alumni, which presents a whole other host of benefits, right? So it's just like, I mean, up top, here's some guidance on being how you could be successful as a designer if you go with the traditional education. Uh, so many designers do decide to take the formal route, right? They go with the traditional education because they think it's all laid out for them, right? And we've just discussed how it's laid out, and for the most part, it is, right. However, there are still steps that you must take to get what you need from the traditional education to really succeed in the real world. So you could first things, lean into that network that you have, right? So it would be a shame if you didn't take full advantage of that pre-built network that we just spoke about. Unfortunately, you'll miss out, on opportunities to meet and develop lasting relationships with probably design pros. You'll also miss the chance to learn things you won't find in the classroom. Leaning into your network can actually help you make the most out of the formal education bit, and it'll ensure you have all the support that you need to succeed. Then comes developing relationships with your professors, right? So your relationships with your professors should be more profound than just saying a thank you when they hand you your assignments. So instead, take time to get to know your professor. Yeah, you don't have to spend every day with them, but get comfortable enough to have a meeting with them to discuss feedback on your assignments, or let them know when you're having trouble. If you can't keep up, and show up and doing your best work. So don't allow your education to take a backseat, to everything else in your life. Make it a clear priority. Show up and do the best work, or probably scrap the idea of formal education altogether. You get what you put in. Remember that. And then set up opportunities for after you graduate. So finally, use this network and campus resources that we spoke about. Set up opportunities for after you're going to graduate. So, for example, if you go to your career services office and get help with your resume, so that it's ready to wow potential employers, or freelance clients, right? Um, yeah, I think those are the points that I wanted to share with you all. And there's so much literature out there that's discussing, and there's the debate happening whether self-taught or formal education is better. But I would say this debate cannot really settle, right? So it's your decision. It's completely in your hands, and I feel these are competent hands that are out there, right? So yeah, I think lastly I will just finish off by saying, um, before making any permanent decisions, take your time researching each option. Look into every detail of both journeys that could affect the way you and your family live. Choose the option that best suits you, is your life, right? What is the vision, and embark on that path with confidence and strategy. So that is it from me. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Lakshya. Now it's time for our panel discussion. Our first two panelists are Michelle and Apurva, who you heard from just a while ago. Our third panelist, Dhruti Soni, is an independent creative who works closely with brands that aspire to make the world a better place and touch the lives of individuals. Dhruti is also the founder of Women in Design Forum, which works towards empowering, inspiring, and celebrating women in creative professions. So let's welcome our panelists. This panel discussion is moderated by Mr. Shyam Sundar, co-founder of UX India.
Hey everyone, hello to our wonderful design community, and also welcome to our panelists who are joining us today for this live session here at Women in Design 2022. Hope you're all enjoying the talk so far and are taking away good nuggets of information. So this time of the year is quite special to us here at UMO Design Foundation, because it always gives us a great pleasure in helping our community who look up to our speakers and panelists on our mission to inspire, educate, and empower a million women and girls. So please join me in welcoming our wonderful panel of designers and leaders who are playing various key roles in their respective enterprises. They bring quite diverse experience, skill sets, and interesting perspectives to share with us all today. So to start with, I would request our panelists to give a very brief intro. I know that you already have spoken, a few of you, but we would like to start with a very quick brief intro, your role, and also touch upon what inspired you and motivated you to get into design in the first place. So let's start with Apurva. Apurva.
Hey Sham, thanks for doing this and thanks for inviting us here. So I'm Apurva and I work as a UX Research Ops Project Manager at IBM. It's a super lengthy title, but essentially what I do is try to project manage my team that works on operationalizing research, which is a relatively new field because we've heard about UX research for a long time, but operationalizing it is something that's very new, and we're doing that at IBM in my team. So in terms of what inspired me to get in design, I think it's always been a dream of mine to work in a field that allows me the creative freedom. And quick fun fact is that I completed my graduation as a computer science engineer, but the subject HCI and it sort of attracted me to the world of design. And thankfully, I also got an internship at IBM in content design. So it just worked out well. So it was all of this that led to design.
Great, thank you. Hey, Dhruti, would you like to go next?
Yeah, hi. Thank you so much for introducing me as well. I'm Dhruti, and as Bhavna had mentioned that I am an independent designer. I worked in industrial as well as UI UX, and currently I have also joined a studio. So I'm also the senior designer at the Space at 9x2 design studio, as well as managing Women in Design, which is an initiative that I founded back in 2019 to support women in design as well as kind of share more knowledge about creatives in the industry, gather them around and create a community around that. So, yeah. And as for why I got into design, I think it was a natural kind of calling towards design for me. I've been designing ever since I was 12 or 13. So my schooling wasn't in India. So I've been doing design and technology since a very young age, and I think it was a natural path for me to kind of follow and then essentially become a designer myself.
Wonderful. Michelle, would you like to go ahead?
Yes. Yes, I'm currently a conversation design manager at GeoHaptic. What my team does is basically we design virtual assistants, like I already spoke about. I found I'm a writer by skill set and an engineer by degree. So Apurva and I have that in common. I found writing obviously at a very early age. I've been professionally writing for over 7 years now. Conversation design I found in 2017 when this whole domain just started taking off. And I'm really inspired by this whole space of writing in technology. That is basically what is makes me very happy to see that what I learned has a space. By degree, I'm an engineer. I never thought I'd be able to write for technology, and I never thought there was a space where good design and tech could meet. And that's what inspires me and inspires me to come to work every day.
Nice, nice. Yeah, as I mentioned, right, I think so the whole purpose of this panel session and then Women in Design initiative itself that we have been doing over the years is is to uh, is to help our community and especially women designers, budding women and budding designers who want to get into the stream, not just the ones who are thinking about it, but also those people who are already wading through the journey and facing the challenges and all those things, right? So this is designed to give them more inspiration, right? So it gives them strength and support required to go through this journey. So the next question to the panel here is, so can you briefly explain the journey so far, and what has been one of the biggest challenges that you have faced so far, and then how did you address it? How did you overcome it? Because we get to hear all success stories, but beyond the scenes, I'm pretty sure there have been challenges that each and every one of us might have faced, right? So anyone could go at this question. If you like, I can help you maybe again, Apurva, you can start with this, right? So, what's been the biggest challenge that you faced so far in your journey, and then how did you overcome it?
Um, Interesting question. Because I especially love to hear stories that are real, and that actually give a good lesson out of the challenge that you are facing. So for me, I think it was mainly making the transition from an engineering mindset to a design mindset, because I did not have a degree that says I'm a designer. So to prove that I have the aptitude and I have the skills that a good designer should have. That was one of the challenges. But um, I think working on being transparent about all the work that you've done, showcasing all the projects that you've done in a very a real way to anyone who's recruiting you works really well, because then they get to see the person that you are. And typically, I have learned that people recruit people, they don't recruit the role as such. So if you are showing learnability, that's good enough. So I think that was one of the challenges and how I overcame it. There was like after coming into the industry, I think the other challenge that I saw was design being a profession that is very much centered in North America and Europe. Um, so, as a designer in India, it has been a challenge to try and find these good communities like UX India now. So, um, connecting with people who feel the same way, who are trying to overcome it, and work in the community. Um, Plus, being in a multinational that is spread across pretty much all countries, and then design being centered in North America again. That's one challenge I think that is not unique to me. Um, I guess most designers in India or outside North America would face it. So I think the way I worked it was trying to show the value that Indian designers bring to the table, and try to show the um, skill set that we're just as good as anyone else, and we need the investment, we need the kind of resources that exist outside. So my focus recently has been on creating this community in IBM India, where we empower new designers, where we provide support to existing designers to showcase their skills, to mentor others. And I have been a community leader here. So I think the only one liner I can give you to solve this problem is take the first step. And if you think no one else is doing it, you do it.
Sound advice. Great. So maybe to Michelle, right? So your role, Michelle, has been slightly different because you've seen a lot, and then now you're managing teams and all that, right? So as a manager, someone, how do we help someone who is trying to grow in their career? So what can they learn from you in terms of the biggest challenge that you have faced, and then how they can overcome it?
Sure. So I moved from an individual contributor to a manager role, and I'll speak from both sides. Number
Sure.
one, as an individual contributor, the key thing is to learn how to scale yourself. Um, you are not going to be able to do one thing just forever. So if you want to do 10x your work or do better work, you need to prioritize your calendar. And as an individual contributor, it's easy to feel like you're getting sucked into one project, but it's important to look outside just one work that you're doing. Pick up the pieces of maybe what the rest of the team can improve on. Is there a practice that we are all failing badly as designers in this company? Look at that, figure out ways to contribute to that problem. And someone, your manager or some higher up, is 100% going to notice that effort that you're putting in. So put in the effort, but also learn to talk about it. And in order to be able to do all of this, you have to prioritize your time, learn to manage your all things that I realized that I couldn't do. But the moment I was able to do that, my calendar opened up. I was able to do so much more than I was doing as a junior designer. And from the manager perspective, if there are managers in the audience, I would like to say that do what you would have wanted to someone else to do for you when you were a junior designer. That would mean appreciating small acts, small instances of someone has taken leadership for a small project. Appreciate that, put design forward. One key thing is to see what your team is doing and push that up to the higher ups. As a manager, that is your whole job, to make sure that your whole team moves forward. And that can only happen when you talk about what your team is doing, talk about it to your peers, talk about it to higher management, and constantly be that source of support. So that's, for me, time management and learning to look beyond what I was doing. Just such a simple practical thing, but learning how to clean up my calendar, block time, not get distracted during the day with 10 questions that people have, and learning to block time off for focus time versus time for other people. That has just been a big learning for me.
Great. So next is for Dhruti, right? So it's clear that you have been treading a slightly different path, Dhruti, right? So as compared to a mainstream designer who works for enterprises, I know that you do that, as well as you have been the founder of Women in Design. So what are some of the challenges that someone like you has faced, right? So because we need more and more people like you to get into this kind of mission to inspire the community and then spread this thing that we are doing, so as to bring more and more women designers on board. So can you put some color to that? Any a challenge that you have faced, and then how did you overcome it?
Yeah. I think a lot of the challenges that I faced were mainly in terms of visibility or trying to find people similar to you. And these also translated well in terms of being an independent designer. So a lot of the challenges I faced were in terms of trying to find maybe clients or jobs or people who could follow the same initiative that I've kind of foreseed. And I think the way I've kind of tackled it or you know overcome the hurdle was by really just talking about it, listening to different perspectives and really listening to different stories that people have had, and being open to any and every person. Because one thing that I've realized during my time at Women in Design is that there's really something to learn from each and every story, and there's never a story that's too small or a person that's too small. You're always going to learn from someone or the other. There's always going to be something that's going to be valuable to you, um, and that's been, I think, a strong suit. And I've seen myself grow by just talking to other people, having more conversations, having conversations that I might not be aware of or I might be uncomfortable having. But I think those conversations really push you towards being a better designer as well, in the long run. So that's been an interesting journey to go on.
Yeah, good to know that perspective from someone like you who's doing not just practicing design, but also spreading it out in a good way. So let me shift gears a little bit here, and then try to bring it to the times that we are living in, right? Um, so everything that you do as Women in Design, I think that in itself is phenomenal. But now, because of all the challenges that we have been facing, because of whatever is going on around us, right? So over the past 2 years, we know what we have been through, and then and these kind of things that bring upon us, right? So that in itself is even more challenging, adding to the challenges that we already have. So how do you all manage to stay relevant and influential amidst all these things, right? So the technologies is changing fast enough, people's behaviors are changing fast enough, everything is, it just seems like we are on a fast track to something. Uh, we don't exactly know what that something is, but it looks like everything is on a fast track, right? So how did you, each one of you, manage to stay relevant and stay influential, and then continue to do what you've been doing? So let's start with Michelle.
Sure. I think there's two facets to this again. One is you yourself being relevant, and then it's also important for other people to feel that you're taking them forward as a team. So number one is obviously it's key to keep learning, keep your eyes open. All this is very basic information. Just look outside, see if when are you keeping up with the times? And one key thing for this is introspection. It is very bad if a designer feels like they are at the perfection, at the peak of what they're doing. That is never going to lead to learning. So it's always important to put yourself as a learner and behave like I only know 50% of what I'm going to do. It's likely that you've been doing what you're doing for 5, 6, 7, 10 years, but you're never done. Look online. It's likely that some junior designer somewhere has found one link, posted it on LinkedIn about some new thing that they learned, but that thing might lead to one idea for you, and then that can trickle down to the rest of your team. So keep your eyes open. Inspiration is everywhere. It's on LinkedIn, it's on the road. You're talking to people, you talk to a junior member of the team. Ask open-ended questions always. Hey, what's a new thing you read? One good thing to ask in interviews is, what's a product that you really like? And you're likely to hear some new name that you've not even heard about yet. So keep your eyes open. And also, when people reach out to you and ask if, like, hey, what are you guys doing to keep stay relevant, as and it's important for you to think about what can drive your team forward. It's important to keep your team's practices relevant as well. We assume that archaic things like the way we hire cannot be changed. Even that can keep changing. In the world of COVID today, you cannot hire having your same old practices, like you have to come to office to have an interview, or there has to be a very long period before you're onboarded. That even small things like that have to keep changing. Things you assume will never ever change for your company is likely going to change. So, I mean, keep your eyes open, bring it up, talk to people about this. Hey, we've done this for like 10 years like this. Can this change? Maybe it can. COVID has shaken all of us up. So anything can change is a good mindset to have.
Nice. Further to Apurva, any any words of wisdom there? How did you manage
Yeah,
to stay relevant and influential? Yeah, please go ahead.
I think I loved what Michelle said, and I completely agree that I do all the same things, and I would advise anyone to do all the same things. Just a few things that I would add there was trying to have a mentor or a coach at all phases in your career, irrespective of whether you are a junior designer or a manager or a senior VP or anyone. You need to have someone for a sounding board. And I typically have, I tend to have a diverse set of mentors. So I have someone who's based out of Canada, who's a very, very senior designer. Um, very senior designer. I have someone who is based out of India. I have women in my mentor list. I have someone from Asia. It's like a nice mix of
Mm,
geo, racial, cultural, gender, you know, uh,
mm,
things. So I think that's important because you get different kinds of perspective. You can't be everywhere and you can't practically learn everything. So I think having those different perspectives is important. That helps you stay relevant as well. Second thing, I think for me, and this is an extension of what Michelle said, is following that design thinking loop. Observe, make, reflect. Observe, make, reflect. It's an infinite loop. So um, you introspect, you work on yourself, you do something, and then you reflect, and you keep doing that to stay relevant, because um, you will never be a perfect designer and you wouldn't know it all, but trying to learn as much as you can, and um, sort of retrospect and introspect as well. So that's a nice balance um, to move your career forward and stay relevant in the changing times.
great. So Dhriti, how do you stay inspired and then stay relevant?
Pretty sure both Michelle and Apurva have covered all the different realms that I've also explored. But a few things that I try to do myself, that I'd like to add on is also read. Read a lot of books, read a lot of articles, listen to a lot of podcasts. think that's been an interesting kind of form of learning for me throughout the pandemic as well. Reading is definitely something that I'm gonna work on getting more of during my day. But I think it's important to also read and learn things beyond your specification. So, say you're a graphic designer, learning something from art direction or learning something from photography or even 3D modeling, anything from those different disciplines could also really help you advance yourself in your current field. Um, Not only in terms of your work, but also in terms of ideas, so or methods of working, etc. So those could really help you kind of find newer and better ways that you could use and apply to your own current discipline and advance yourself there. So that's been a really fun way to kind of go about things as well.
Great. So let me go to the next question, which kind of connects to what we all just mentioned and then shared, right? So again, starting with you, Dhriti, you mentioned about books. So now this question is where it kind of gets a little personal, but then I think uh, that's the whole point about our audience joining this panel session and then trying to know from each one of you. And if you were to give away one thing so the audience can take it forward. Also, again, in this case, because you mentioned about books, I would like you to give away one book that you think our audience should read, so that will help them in the way that you are thinking, right? So, one book that you recommend, and then along with that, uh, do you have any piece of advice for our budding designers in our community?
Good question. I'm gonna give away two books because I can't choose between the two. But one that I've really loved reading and that I'm currently going through right now. I think both of them I'm kind of reading simultaneously. One is Invisible Women, and that's an interesting one. I think I would really ask everyone to go through. It's about data inequalities, or just how, like, I think it's a really good book to just really understand um, what it means to be an inclusive designer and how you can kind of really improve yourself towards becoming a better inclusive designer as well as a system actually overall. And the second one is a more of a self-help book, but that's Atomic Habits. That's one that I'm kind of going through right now as well. And
Okay.
any feedback for any advice, I would say I'm going back to what Apurva had said because that's one that I've kind of always stuck to, which is to just take the first step. That's one thing that I really think applies to everything in life. And one more thing that I kind of make sure to remind myself of is this is a motto that I live by, which is to innovate, not iterate. So I think it's really important as designers to kind of remember to not just keep iteration and not keep creating iterations of the same thing. To try to push yourself and keep trying to chase innovation rather than iteration. So yeah.
Yeah. I asked, I asked for one of each, and then you have been so generous in giving two of which. Great. So that was Dhriti, who shared her the books that she would like to give away to our audience. So, what about you, Apurva? I mean, it could be a book or it could be anything. It could be an object or information source, whatever it is that you think will help our audience, plus a piece of advice.
Yeah, so I think in terms of book, again, I would recommend two books, just because that's what Dhruti started. So I'm going to
We are all
keep
feeling
up.
we are all feeling super generous today. Nice.
No, yeah, I think it's more about you can't choose one book ever. So for me, it's The Moment of Lift. This book is uh, has been successful in showing me how women exist in different areas of life, in career, in at home, in relationships, in farming, in economy. So it's a pretty diverse set of information, and it shows the reality of things with data. So I really like the advice that Melinda Gates gives in the book and the reality that she brings. um, I would recommend everyone to read it. whether or not you are a woman working in design. Second book is Lean In. Again, this is a very generic book. It's not a design specific book, but this is really focused on how to advance your career as a woman in the corporate world. A lot of the things in the book are about corporate America, which pretty much applies to you if you are working in a multinational company, or even if you are in any company really. So for me, this book has been very helpful to um, understand biases, unconscious biases in people, and trying to find ways to mitigate them. So any book that gives actionable items for me, not just data, is something that I go for. So these are two that I would strongly recommend people to read. In terms of advice, well, so many nice thoughts going on here, and I don't think we have any untouched subject, but um, I think if you are a new budding designer, make the most out of communities that exist, and try to leverage your network into, giving you potential opportunities. But when you're making those connections, try to be genuine about it and approach it as a method of learning something new, instead of looking at it as a pure business transaction where you are approaching someone and, hey, can you give me a referral, can you give me a job, and that's it. I think people, and especially designers, really like to hear stories, really like to connect with other people. So try to sort of leverage these platforms like LinkedIn, these communities, and make the most of what you have existing.
Cool. Michelle?
Yes. So I just really couldn't. I have a panic attack every time I hear tell me about your favorite book because there are too many. I'm going to give you two resources.
Okay.
But one is an online resource. It's a website called Laws of UX. It's a godsend to anybody who is not a traditionally taught designer, because you keep hearing these impressive sounding terms and you want to find out what it means. This is one resource that's pretty awesome. Lawsofux.com. The second resource, and I thought really hard about what book I wanted to share, and there's just too many. So I'll share just two names. One is The Design of Everyday Things. Every designer has already read it. If you're not a traditional designer, please go read it. Good to know. And the second is a funny science book that I had discovered as a young child, which has completely blown my mind. It's by Mary Roach, who is a science author who writes about these topics like the army techniques that none of us know about. So there are apparently guns that shoot ducks at airplanes to find out how airplanes would react if that happens. And these crazy science facts that you would never know about, I think, is just so inspiring sometimes to just tell you that, hey, it's okay. Not everything has to be serious. Go and learn new things. So this book is called Grunt by Mary Roach. Yeah, it's a fun read anytime you have a nice Saturday off. And I believe I was to share advice. Advice, just two things. I mean, keep learning, and uh, keep learning, and always do your best at anything you do. Pay attention to small details, proofread, make sure you're putting your best out, and especially for women, for anybody really, I found this is the common thing that everybody needs, which is go and ask for what you want. It is okay to go ask for more money, ask for more projects. No, but do you women overthink things like crazy? Am I the 100 best person to ask for this? Go and ask for it. It doesn't matter if you're 90%. Someone is bound to respond. So yeah, all the best on your journey.
Can I just say like a big yes to what Michelle just said? Yay!
Same here.
Yes.
We should all say yes to that. Yeah, yeah, yeah. So thank you so much, lovely panelists. I think I personally took away a lot of great insights, and also a few new books that I have never heard of before. uh, Thank you so much once again for joining the session, and you all have a great day. We look forward to more from you in the future. Thanks. Over to you, Bona.
Thank you so much, everyone. So, well, ladies and gentlemen, this wraps up our first session of Women in Design 2022. On behalf of the UMO Design Foundation, I thank you all for making the time to join us here today. It's been a pleasure to host this event, and I hope to see you all again next weekend. Thank you.